In January 2024, a federal judge did something that had never happened before in United States aviation history. He blocked the merger between two of the largest American low-cost carriers, a $3.8 billion operation, under the argument that the acquisition would harm American passengers. The Department of Justice celebrated. It was a historic victory. 2 years later, the American government is considering spending $500 million of public money to keep Spirit alive. The same airline. An airline that filed for bankruptcy twice in less than a year, that carries only 3.4% of American domestic passengers, and that, according to industry experts, wouldn't be missed if it disappeared tomorrow. And in the middle of all this, the war in Iran just doubled the price of jet fuel, exactly when Spirit was about to emerge from its second bankruptcy. Aviate has reached 20,000 subscribers passionate about aviation. Our sincere thanks for your support. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Before talking about the bailout, we need to understand what's actually at stake. Because at first glance, Spirit looks too small to matter. But maybe that's not quite right. From February 2025 to January 2026, Spirit held 3.4% of the American domestic market. Compare that with Delta, American, Southwest, and United, each with between 16 and 18%. Spirit is 1/10 the size of the majors. In Fort Lauderdale, in South Florida, the story changes completely. There, Spirit holds about 27% of the market. If the airline shuts down, the impact will be concentrated mainly there. But here's the point almost nobody noticed. Spirit's role in the American market goes beyond its own market share. The ultra-low-cost model forces the majors to offer lower fares on the same routes. According to data presented by the Department of Justice itself during the 2024 antitrust case, when Spirit enters a route, average fares fall between 10 and 30%. It's called the Spirit effect. This benefits millions of passengers who have never flown and will never fly on Spirit. The person buying a Delta ticket between Chicago and Orlando is paying less because Spirit operates the same route. When Spirit leaves, Delta raises the fare. Simple as that. That's the argument the Department of Justice used to block the merger with JetBlue, and it's the same argument that now, ironically, may justify the $500 million bailout. On February 24, 2026, just days before the war in Iran began, Spirit Airlines announced to its investors that it expected to exit Chapter 11 in late spring or early summer. The company had reached an agreement with its creditors. Everything seemed on track. And then, the Strait of Hormuz became a war zone. Tanker traffic through the strait, the route through which roughly 20% of all the oil consumed in the world passes, was severely restricted. Barrel prices shot up, and jet fuel rose along with it. Now, look at the number that matters. J.P. Morgan did the math. If fuel stayed at $4.60 per gallon throughout the year, which was the price at the end of March, Spirit's projected operating margin for 2026 would deteriorate to approximately negative 20%. That would add $360 million to the company's expenses for the fiscal year alone. To put that in perspective, $360 million is more than Spirit's entire cash balance at the end of 2025. A company about to emerge from bankruptcy, a war that couldn't have been predicted, a fuel shock that eats up more money than it has in the bank. And now, the American government enters the scene. Spirit wasn't always Spirit. The company was founded in 1983 in Michigan under the name Charter One Airlines. It operated charter tourism flights to Las Vegas and the Bahamas, nothing glamorous. In '92, the company brought in newer aircraft, changed its name to Spirit Airlines, and began operating scheduled flights between Detroit and Atlantic City. The major turning point came in the 2000s, when Spirit embraced the ultra-low-cost model. The logic was simple, and for some, aggressive. Charge the minimum possible for the ticket and sell everything else as an extra. Checked baggage, carry-on baggage, seat selection, water during the flight. everything paid separately. And the model worked. It worked for decades. Spirit grew fast. According to the International Council on Clean Transportation, it was the second most fuel-efficient operator in the United States. It was also the first American airline to receive the Airbus A320neo in 2016, the economy version of the aircraft. The model was real, efficient, and had millions of customers who depended on those cheap fares. But every model has a limit, and Spirit's began to appear in 2022. Here's where things get interesting. In February 2022, Frontier Airlines announced a merger with Spirit. The operation would have created the fifth largest airline in the United States and the largest ultra-low cost in the country. The two companies projected combined savings of $1 billion per year. It was the move that made sense. Two low-cost airlines joining forces to gain scale in a market dominated by four giants. But then, JetBlue came in with a higher offer, $3.8 billion. Spirit rejected Frontier and accepted JetBlue. And that's when the Department of Justice, under the previous administration, stepped in. In January 2024, a federal judge blocked JetBlue's acquisition of Spirit. It was the first time in history that a merger of American airlines was rejected based on antitrust legislation. The DOJ's argument was clear. The merger would eliminate a discount carrier from the market and force many passengers to pay higher fares. The government blocked the merger to protect the consumer. Now, 2 years later, a different administration is considering injecting $500 million of public money into a company that, without the blocked merger, could have been integrated into JetBlue and would be operating normally today. The irony is complete and verifiable. A private salvation was blocked in court. Now a public one is being considered. The taxpayer, who was meant to be protected by the first decision, may end up funding the second. Spirit's fall wasn't linear, it was a spiral. The company entered Chapter 11 for the first time in November 2024. It emerged in March 2025. It entered Chapter 11 again in August 2025, just 5 months after emerging from the first. 2 bankruptcies in less than a year. When Spirit entered its second bankruptcy, it had 214 aircraft in its fleet, 48 owned and 166 leased. The fleet has already been reduced to 125 aircraft. But it doesn't stop there. The restructuring plan approved in March 2026 calls for reducing the fleet to somewhere between 76 and 80 aircraft by the third quarter of 2026. In 2022, Spirit had plans to grow to 293 aircraft. Now it will operate with fewer than 80, almost 75% loss in 4 years. And along with the aircraft go the routes, the jobs, and the fares on those routes inevitably will rise. A crucial factor that accelerated Spirit's fall has nothing to do with finances and everything to do with engineering. Spirit bet heavily on the Airbus A320neo equipped with Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan engines, the PW1100G engines. These engines promised a revolution in fuel efficiency, but they started presenting serious problems. Extensive inspection and repair campaigns forced airlines worldwide to ground aircraft for months, sometimes for more than a year. And Spirit, with a large proportion of its fleet dependent on these engines, was the most affected. Dozens of aircraft out of service, limited replacement capacity, revenue lost every month. And here's the important detail. The 2026 fuel crisis arrived at a company that was already operating with an involuntarily reduced fleet, no margin to absorb any additional shock. And then the final straw came with the war in Iran. Now let's get into the details of the possible bailout. The American government is considering lending up to $500 million to Spirit. In exchange, the government would receive warrants, financial instruments that give the right to purchase shares of the company in the future, giving the United States a stake in the airline. Direct federal investments in private sector companies are rare. Direct federal investments in private sector companies are rare, but not without precedent, including in the aviation sector itself during previous crises. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said in a press conference that he was taking a look at Spirit at the president's request. No decision has been made yet. Fort Lauderdale, Spirit's main base, is one of the highest air traffic regions in Florida. The impact of a liquidation would be immediately visible to millions of passengers. And this is where the story really gets interesting, because the debate about this bailout isn't about whether it's legal or illegal. It's about whether it makes sense.
Mike Boyd is the CEO of Boyd Group International, one of the leading aviation forecasting firms in the United States, and he was direct about what happens if Spirit shuts down. In his words, paraphrasing, if Spirit closes in 2 weeks, no one will miss it. It's a strong statement, and it's partially true, but it's incomplete. What's true, Spirit's assets will be absorbed by other airlines. Passengers will find alternatives. The American air system will not collapse. Most routes will continue to be operated. What's incomplete, routes where Spirit is the only low-cost operator will see fares rise immediately, and you can't always measure that impact before it happens. Spirit's assets are already being distributed. 2 Spirit gates at O'Hare were transferred to United Airlines for $30.2 million. 2 others had already gone to American Airlines in December 2025. Spirit has slots at LaGuardia and at Reagan National in Washington. Slots at those 2 airports are extremely rare assets. They've already been pledged as collateral in financings. If Spirit liquidates, where do those slots go? To the majors. And so the market, which the DOJ tried to protect by blocking the merger with JetBlue, becomes even more concentrated in the hands of 4 airlines. The cure killed the patient it was supposed to save. But there's an alternative that's being ignored in every discussion about the bailout. Frontier. Remember that 2022 merger that would have created the largest ultra-low cost in the United States? It still makes sense. Maybe it makes more sense now than it did back then. JetBlue's founder, David Neeleman, was direct about this. According to him, the American market can only sustain one dominant ultra-low cost at scale. Without that, the model simply doesn't work. If Frontier acquired Spirit now, whether after a partial liquidation or as part of the government bailout, it would create the scale that neither of them had individually. Combined fleet, combined network, real economies of scale. But here comes the problem. The same DOJ that blocked JetBlue would have to approve Frontier, and the antitrust logic they used in 2024 would apply in 2026 as well. So the American government is facing 3 options: let Spirit fall and concentrate the market even further, bail it out with public money, or allow the merger with Frontier even against the 2024 antitrust principles. Leave your opinion in the comments. If this video helped you understand what's behind this crisis, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for the next analyses on commercial aviation.